What connection does your shower water have with growing healthy hair? That's one of the things we're going to be talking about in this video. As much as I love taking a deep dive into the minutiae of historical and natural hair care practices, and having an understanding of these techniques did help me grow my own hair from chin length to now almost tailbone length, I've recently realized that my hair care videos have been missing a very important element, a very important part of the discussion, and that's what this video is going to be focused on. So what is this missing element? We have so far missed mentioning some of the most fundamental healthy hair care practices that I think we all need to at least have some understanding of if we're going to grow healthy hair. So you may be asking, Catherine, haven't we already discussed all these things? The answer is yes, in a way, but I'm going to give you an analogy, and it is, let's call it the healthy hair pyramid analogy. So if you picture all of the different hair care practices that people need to be using or at least have an understanding of in order to grow long hair, picture it being like a pyramid. So the most fundamental things that need to be understood are at the bottom foundation of that pyramid. And then as we go up higher, we kind of build on those practices and we add more refining features to our hair care that help us even more. But if we don't have an understanding of what's at the bottom of the pyramid of hair care knowledge, we're not going to get very far with our healthy hair growth journeys. So I've realized recently that I think we've been covering a lot of stuff that's kind of higher up on the pyramid, such as the importance of dry finger detangling, the importance of using oil in your hair, the importance of protective styles, looking at historical hair care practices, etc., etc. But I've sort of neglected to mention some of the basic foundational principles that are actually they are very basic. I guess that's the reason why I have neglected to mention them, because I've sort of just been wrongfully assuming that everyone already knows these things, but I've realized I don't think everyone does know these things, so that's what this video will be about. So this video is going to be very simple. I believe we're only covering 3 or 4 different points. So the first couple points are going to be relating to practices that we should generally try to be avoiding in our hair. And then at the end, I'm going to mention a point or two that relates specifically to one of the hair care practices I recommend and why it is so important, and just give you a better understanding of why that is something that's recommended for you to try in your hair if you want to grow long, healthy hair naturally. Point number 1, heat is not good for your hair. Okay, so this one is pretty basic, and I believe most people have at least some understanding of this principle, that if you want to grow long, healthy hair, heat is something that you should be limiting. But it bears mentioning because we live in a modern day world that is just saturated with heat-based hair care tools, and it's saturated with sort of promoting hair care looks and hairstyles that are only accomplished through using heat on our hair. So I really think that this is important to mention, and it's important to just lay a foundation for embracing our own natural hair textures without feeling like we need to literally be frying our hair to get it to have a certain socially acceptable look. So let's face it, on this channel, we love investigating historical women's hair care practices because, let's face it, so many historical women had gorgeous, long, and thick hair. But one of the things I haven't mentioned yet is the fact that historical women didn't do, or at least did a lot less of, certain popular modern hair care practices, such as the use of heat, that we all know are damaging to our hair. Now, I'm not saying that historical women never used heat on their hair, because there was historical practices of using curling tongs and literally heating them up in a fire to curl your hair, but I would argue that this was likely more of an exception than the rule, because it was probably inconvenient to do this, and it was probably much more risky to the hair. If you think about that scene in Little Women where Jo is curling Meg's hair and she literally loses a chunk of hair, I imagine that was quite more likely to happen using those historical methods as opposed to the modern heat tools we have today that have very precise temperature controls that make it more accessible to use heat. So I would imagine that using heated tongs in history was more of a rarity, and they likely relied more on heatless curling of their hair, like using rags to wrap up their hair before they went to bed, for example. So let's contrast this to the modern day. Most modern people are relying heavily on heated blow dryers, straighteners, curling irons, and Many people don't even know how to care for their hair or how to get their hair to look nice without using these heated products. This is partly due to our loss of knowledge of traditional hair care techniques, such as boar bristle brushing, but that's another topic. So our hair is really like a plant. Imagine if we took a heated straightener or a heated blow dryer and applied heat to the leaves of a plant, or if we literally ran the leaves of a plant through a hair straightener. What do you think that would do to the plant? It wouldn't be too good, would it? And although our hair is not exactly the same as a plant, I do like to think of my hair as a plant that grows from my head. And just like I wouldn't use heat on that plant behind me, I'm not going to use heat on my hair because that's going to damage it. Using heat on our hair dries it out, damages the hair cuticle, which makes it more prone to breakage, and it just creates frizz and pretty much destroys whatever natural hair texture we have. As a great and well-known example, there's so many people out there, you may be one of them, who have some degree of natural curl or wave in their hair. And they get into the habit of using, say, a straightener on their hair to straighten out this texture because they don't know how to deal with it. But the problem with that is that over time, the use of heat on their beautiful natural hair texture actually destroys its natural beauty and just makes their hair become a frizzy mess unless they use the heat. And so it creates this sort of addiction to the heat tool. And it's only when they stop using heat for at least a month or two that their natural curl pattern sort of recovers itself and comes back, and they realize, wow, I actually have had beautiful hair all along, but I didn't know it. So where I stand on heat tools is I literally never use heat on my hair. Like, never. I'm pretty sure the last time I used heat on my hair was 10 years ago. I'm not kidding. It was probably 10 years ago, and I have not used heat a single time since then. And that's my principle. You might not have the same principle. For you, maybe you've been using heat on your hair every day, and you're just going to set a goal to take a baby step of using heat only once a week, or once a month, or once a year, whatever it is. Just try to use heat less on your hair. If that means using it never, great. If that means using it less often than you were, that's great too. And I would encourage you to look into heatless ways of styling your hair because you can achieve some really beautiful results that way. And that is what most historical people have been using on their hair throughout all of time. So it's definitely doable. Now, before we move on, I'd like to give one more mention of heat, and that actually relates to the temperature of water that we use to wash our hair with. Now, this isn't something that a lot of people think of when they think of avoiding heat on their hair, but this does qualify as heat. If you're hopping into a really, really hot steaming shower and that's what you're using to wash your hair, you are using heat on your hair. So am I saying that you need to start having freezing cold showers? No, of course not. But just be conscious of the temperature of water you're using in the shower and try to gradually make it a little bit cooler than it is. Personally, I like to shower in water that is not much warmer than lukewarm. Maybe it's like the temperature of an outdoor pool in the summer. Something like that. Not super hot. Like, I'm not showering with my hair in like hot tub temperatures of water. I don't even like the feeling of that for my overall body, let alone my hair. So again, I would just say be conscious of the heat you're using on your hair in the shower. One more quick tip for you that's sort of unrelated is a way that you can actually get benefits of using cold water on your hair, but do it without freezing yourself, is to do a cold water rinse right before you get out of the shower. And what this does is it seals the hair cuticle, which makes your hair stronger, less prone to breakage, less prone to frizz, and more shiny. The cold water also stimulates blood circulation to go to your scalp. So the way I do this is, as a final step before I get out of the shower, I literally just tip all my hair over, get the cold water to go on my scalp and my hair, but not on my body. So that's another tip for you that's somewhat related to this topic of heat. Okay, point 2 of the healthy hair care basics: dyes and chemical treatments are not good for your hair. So I think this is sort of another fairly no-brainer one for most people. I think most people realize that using chemical dyes and chemical treatments on their hair probably isn't the best for their hair, but unfortunately we live in a society where these things are just so mainstream that a lot of people sort of become dependent on them over time, and I'm not judging anyone who chooses to dye their hair for whatever reason. We're going to talk about that in a bit, but Generally, I just like to make the point that we live in a society where we're like fish swimming in a sea of chemical treatments and heat tools, as we already discussed. And so sometimes people just haven't even taken the time to step back and really evaluate, like, why am I dyeing my hair? Is this really necessary? Are there natural alternatives? And what is this doing to the long-term health of my hair? So right off the bat, I just like to give a disclaimer. I'm not judging anyone who chooses to dye their hair. I have zero cares about what other people do with their hair. But I'm sitting here as someone who's giving you hair care advice. And if you're in a place where you're open to that, then great, let's go on talking about this. So back to our plant analogy. If we were to use a chemical dye to change the color of the leaves of a plant, what do you think that would do to the plant? It would honestly probably kill the plant. Now again, I'm not saying our hair is an exact parallel with a plant. There are some differences there, but our hair is, in a sense, a sort of vegetation that is growing from our head. And I think it's wise to sort of look at other things in nature and consider, like, would I do this to a plant? Okay, I'm not going to do it to my hair. So I'm sure that certain types of dyes or chemical treatments are worse than others. And again, I'm not condemning anyone who chooses to dye their hair. I'm just trying to raise more of a higher level of discernment and awareness around the practices that we choose to do with our hair. So the problem with hair dye is that a lot of people start on this train of dyeing their hair from when they're relatively young, and it can become sort of an addiction in the same way that using heat tools can become an addiction, where we no longer like our natural hair color and we feel like we have to keep dyeing it. Certainly this comes into play when we talk about people who are dyeing their hair to cover gray, but even people who start dyeing their hair from when they're very young, they can become somewhat addicted to it because they don't like their natural hair color anymore. And I'm sure there are a lot of young people who have been dyeing their hair for several years and their hair is still relatively healthy. But I would say that dye is one of those things where the longer you do it, the more likely you are to have a long-term negative effect. Even if this doesn't show up for like 20 years, I'm sure there's still going to be a negative effect from having dyed your hair for that long, not to mention any effects on your body and internal health. So if you're one of those people who dyeing your hair is absolutely a non-negotiable for you, you feel comfortable dyeing your hair, maybe you're trying to cover grays and you're not comfortable letting your natural hair color out for whatever reason, I would just tell you to use as much discernment as possible about how often you choose to dye your hair, what kind of dyes you use. To be honest, I'm not an expert on hair dyes. I would recommend you to look into natural hair dyes, and I will actually recommend and link a company that I am not sponsored by in any way, but they sell really high quality henna-based hair dyes. So they either use straight henna if you want a red color, or if you want a different color, they mix the henna with other herbs to achieve different colors like brown or black. They even have a blonde one. It doesn't bleach your hair, but it brings out natural blonde highlights. So I would definitely recommend checking them out. I'd like to give a word about people who are dyeing their hair due to gray hairs. I have no judgment to pass on you because I am not in that position, and I try not to cast judgment on people who are in completely different situations than I have yet to experience. However, I do have a couple points that I'd like to make. The first one is, again, to look into natural hair dye options like the one I already mentioned. But the second point I'd like to make is that actually, two more points I'd like to make. The second point I'd like to make is that we should actually rewind and ask ourselves why we are even dyeing gray hair. Again, I'm not in this position, so I'm not passing judgment, but I think gray hair is beautiful because it's a manifestation of maturity, experience that's gained through living longer, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I think gray hair is a sign of kind of respect in a way. I mean, of course, our modern society is just obsessed with everyone looking young all the time, but that's not reality, and that's not a healthy way to look at life and our appearance. Okay, the third point I'd like to make is that going gray by a certain age is not necessarily a genetic inevitability. In other words, there are a lot of natural hair care practices that we can be using in our hair that can actually either delay or even prevent our hair from going gray, certainly from going gray at a younger age. Let's look at Indian hair care. There's a lot of older Indian ladies who are not dyeing their hair, but they have beautiful, naturally jet black hair still, even though they are like 80. And they chalk it up to the use of things like oil treatments and their Ayurvedic herbal treatments that actually do help to prevent the hair from graying or reduce graying if it's already happened. Even something like onion juice, using onion juice on your scalp and in your hair, is known to reduce graying that's already present and certainly to prevent more graying from occurring. So that's a whole other thing that I don't think people really know about, and it's an interesting point to consider. Point 3. What kind of shower water are you using? Okay, so most of us here in North America, if we are living in any kind of town or city, have chlorine being added to our municipal water supply and the water that therefore comes out of our taps and out of our shower. There is literally no benefit to consuming chlorine or getting chlorine on our skin. Of course, we know the reason it's being added is to kill bacteria. We don't want to get an infection and die. However, once it's done that job, it really should be removed from your water, certainly from your drinking water. I think most people are already aware of that, if only because chlorine tastes awful. But most people, I think, haven't yet considered the potentially detrimental effects of having chlorinated water in their shower, therefore in the water that they're using to wash their hair. So I think we're all aware of the fact that chlorinated pools, which have a much higher concentration of chlorine, aren't good for our hair. But it does follow that shower water that has chlorine in it, even though it is of less concentration than in a pool, over time it can have the exact same detrimental effects on our hair and scalp as swimming in a pool would have. It just takes a little longer for that damage to build up. Not to mention the fact that our skin is our largest organ, and when we're showering in warm or hot chlorinated water, our pores are open and our body is definitely absorbing some of those chemicals. Not to mention the effect of chloramines. So chloramines are what happens when chlorine reacts with the air and it forms an organic gas substance. So in other words, anytime you smell chlorine in the air around a pool or in your shower or around your bath, you're smelling chloramines and you're inhaling chloramines into your lungs. Chloramines are actually one of the most detrimental forms of chlorine. It gets right into your body and it's not great for your health either. So that's another reason why I'm going to recommend that anyone who cares about their hair or general health who has chlorinated water should consider getting some kind of shower filter to remove that. I'm going to link a similar product in the description to what I use for my family. A shower filter is a very easy intervention to make. It's not something you have to hook up to your whole house water supply, although I would love to do that one day. It's just something you literally screw on to the pipe that leads to your shower head, and by pipe I mean the pipe that's coming out of the wall. So it's very easy. Anyone can install this themselves, and it works in the same way that a carbon filter works. In fact, it is a form of carbon filter. And so it removes the chlorine as the water is coming out of the shower head, and I have never had any problems with water pressure being affected by this or anything, so I recommend everyone to try it. Another great reason to have a shower filter is that if you have excessively hard water, meaning water that has a lot of minerals in it, that's also not the best for your hair. It can cause your hair to feel just like it has a lot of buildup on it and on your scalp. It can cause just kind of dry, more frizzy hair, and it can cause your hair to be harder to wash, especially if you're using a natural clay wash. So if you're not aware of the hardness of your water, it might be worth checking that out. Especially if you have been trying a natural or no poo hair routine and it's just not been working for you, you may want to check out the hardness of your water. But anyways, another benefit of a shower filter is it does help to decrease some level of water hardness. I'm not sure how effective it would be against very, very hard water, but it certainly is a start. Point 4, the importance of pH balance. Let's talk about pH of our hair and why it is, again, another fundamental point to understand about hair care. And this point is also very important to understand why I am recommending people to use an apple cider vinegar rinse. So what is pH? I'm not a scientist, but basically pH is a measure of how acidic or how alkaline a substance is. So on one end of the spectrum, there is a very alkaline, and then on the far other end of the spectrum is very acidic. And then there's a point right in the middle that's like completely balanced. there's all these different values depending on how acidic or how alkaline a substance is. So everything has an optimal pH, meaning the pH that it likes to be at in order to be balanced, at least everything that pertains to our body, like our skin and our hair. So our hair's optimal pH is actually more on the acidic side, which is why I recommend using something like a diluted apple cider vinegar rinse, because it is somewhat acidic, and so it's a great last step to do in the shower before you get out to seal the cuticle of your hair and balance its pH, which has a number of little known benefits like decreasing tangles, increasing shine and manageability of your hair, and many others. It's also a great remedy against anyone who has too hard of water as well, because hard water is more alkaline water with more minerals in it, and acidity helps rinse away those extra minerals on your hair. Now, the thing about most hair care products is that most of the time what we're using to wash our hair and condition our hair is not a optimal pH that our hair likes to be at. And that's fine most of the time, but you just want to make sure that you're balancing your pH as a final step before you get out of the shower. Okay, everyone, I hope you found these points wildly helpful. I really hope it's helped to sort of get your wheels rolling about evaluating things that you may not have considered before. If you did find this information helpful, give this video a like, leave your comments below. I appreciate each and every one of you who chooses to comment. If you'd like to thank me in a monetary way, there is a super thanks button below the video that you can use to thank me. And I also have a virtual buy me a coffee button linked in the description. And I really appreciate each and every one of you who chooses to support me in this way. It means a lot. The accompanying blog post for this video will be linked in the description. I will also have several products linked in the description and in the pinned comment for hair products that I recommend. All of these are natural products. They're what I've been using on my hair for several years now that has helped to grow it out from chin length to hip length. So I definitely recommend checking out that list. And there is a full master list on my website, and that page is linked for you in the description. If you'd like to join an awesome natural hair care community, consider joining my YouTube membership. For the low price of approximately $5 a month, you get early ad-free access to each and every one of my videos for 24 hours. You also get at least 2 exclusive members-only posts from me sharing insider information and hair hacks that I've discovered with you all. And best of all, you get access to an exclusive members-only Discord chat group. And we have a lot of fun in this group. There's a lot of great people in there who are pursuing their own natural hair care journeys. We have a lot of great discussions, and I try to get in there every day and answer people's questions. So if you'd like your questions answered, and if you'd like to meet up with a community of like-minded natural hair care people, then be sure to join the YouTube membership. That will be linked in the description. I believe there might also be a box under this video, but I'm not positive on that. But either way, it will be linked in the description for where you can join. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel, and hit the notifications bell if you enjoy natural historical hair care content, as well as historical handmade fashion. And if you'd like to access my free weekly email newsletter, be sure to sign up for that on my blog. Okay, see you on the next video.